Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's the Monday show with me, Andrew Musgrove, and my colleague Aaron Stokes. We come to you on the back of another defeat for Newcastle United, this time 2-1 down at Stamford Bridge. And it feels like a bit of a defining week in Newcastle United's season, with Chelsea up here at St James's Park on Wednesday in the Carabao Cup before Arsenal visit Tyneside on Saturday afternoon. Aaron, welcome back to the podcast. How are you keeping? You well?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. As everyone can see in the if you're watching on YouTube and Facebook, we're not in the studio together this afternoon. Two quite different ailments as to why we're not together.
Yeah, Aaron's gone to the gym and knocked his back. I'm sure he would like to tell a different story of some heroic action, but he was lifting a drink from the vending machine and pulled his back. I don't know what the truth is actually, but yes, and the illness that I've had for the last 2 weeks has continued into this week. But the call this morning was that my little girl has hand, foot, and mouth. I mean, hand, foot, and mouth. Everyone thinks that's the disease to do with cattle, but apparently it's
Is it
rife
2001
in
again? Haven't heard
little ones.
that season a while.
So I've been dealing with that this morning. Called in me mum. She's taking a little one out there for a walk. So hopefully she'll have a nice nap while we're doing this podcast. Not because she's listening to the podcast or anything, because that doesn't send anyone to sleep. This is going to be riveting. But yes, that's why we're not in the studio. Hopefully be back next Monday in the studio after Newcastle are through at the next round of the cup and have beaten Arsenal, right?
Hopefully, yes.
Yes, that's the enthusiasm. But thank you very much for joining us. It is much appreciated. As always, this podcast is brought to you by NORD VPN. We've got a very special discount offer if you want to get your NORD VPN plan. Go to nordvpn.com/2. Our link will give you 4 extra months on the 2-year plan. There's no risk with NORD's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link will be in the podcast episode description box. Thank you to everyone who is taking us up on this offer. The numbers have been really nice to see, and you're just supporting the podcast. And of course, you're protecting all your devices via NORD VPN, the very best VPN around. You can, as we say, keep your bank details secure, your passwords, your online identity. You can also switch your location to wherever you are, wherever you want to in the world. So if you're abroad and you want to maybe catch your British shows, you can change it to the UK and never miss your favorite TV shows and a host of other benefits as well. So do click that link in the podcast description box and help support the podcast. Aaron, I said there in the introduction, it feels like a season-defining week. Given Newcastle have just lost there to Chelsea, given that Chelsea are one of those teams who are battling for a top 6 position, given that Newcastle United haven't won in 5 in the Premier League, is it a season-defining couple of games coming up now with the League Cup and then Arsenal on Saturday?
Yeah, it really is. And I don't think it's sort of, hyperbole or over the top to say that. I do generally feel like we are reaching a sort of key period of not just the season, but maybe of Eddie Howe's future at the club. I think we'll probably both agree that we're still Eddie Howe in. I don't think, I certainly am not anywhere near wanting Eddie Howe to go, but I think, as we touched on last week on the pod, is that tide beginning to turn? I think, a cup exit this week and then a defeated Arsenal would really, really, turn that tide even further. And I think then, the fixtures get no easier after that. You've got to go to Inform, Nottingham Forest, you've got Liverpool, you've got West Ham. So it is defining. But as I say, I don't think I'm quite there yet in terms of, it's time for Eddie Howe to go. But I certainly think I suspect we'll have some people listening to this, some people in the comments here watching with us that are maybe saying, it's becoming a bit stale. He's not changing it up. He's got the most out of these players that he can, and it's maybe time to look elsewhere.
Well, I went into Sunday's game full of optimism, full of positivity. They've been creating chances. The law of averages suggests that you're going to score a goal and you're probably going to win a game at some point. That was what I was, hedging my bets on. But it was such a different performance to what I felt we saw against Brighton, against Everton, where they looked good. Defensively, they looked strong and they were creating chance after chance after chance and just not taking them. On Sunday, to me, it kind of looked like a team who turned up at Stamford Bridge with a mindset of points of bonus. They didn't look like they believed in themselves. It didn't look like they thought they could beat what I felt was a Chelsea side that isn't a very good Chelsea side at all. Yes, they're 4th or 5th in the league, but you watch that game, they rely on one man to pull the strings. And if Cole Palmer isn't on his day, which of course he was on Sunday, then I don't think Chelsea have got anyone else to rely on. I don't think there's too much difference in terms of the first 11s when you compare the two teams. But on Sunday, even with the scores level at 1-1, there was only ever going to be one team that was going to win that game, and that was Chelsea. And I think it comes down to, did they believe in themselves that they could go toe-to-toe with Chelsea and actually beat them?
I agree with the point you've just made there about even when it was 1-1, I never really was confident that Newcastle would get anything out of the game. And yes, there maybe lack belief. The thing I disagree with you on is maybe that you're doing Chelsea a bit of a disservice. I think defensively, Chelsea were there to be got at. But I actually think if you look at that Chelsea team and the players they've got in attack, they're a very good side. And I do think, despite, saying they were going to have an absolute stinker of a season, I think they probably will end up, pushing the top four very, very close if they continue this current form. That being said, from a Newcastle point of view, I don't think there was any semblance of a plan yesterday. And it was obvious 4 minutes in when Cole Palmer put the ball in the back of the net, because how many times did we see, in that game yesterday, moments where no one knew who was picking Cole Palmer up? You had points of the game where it was on Fabian Schär to go and do it. You had a brief period of the game where one of the midfielders was told to drop and do it. There was just no semblance of a plan for me. And you had Nicholas Jackson absolutely tearing Dan Burn a new one. You had Cole Palmer absolutely running rings around both Schär and the midfield. It just was such an uncharacteristic Eddie Howe performance. He usually sets his side up so well without the ball out of possession. And I just thought that midfield, as we've seen time and time again this season, was getting overran far too easily. And this isn't a new problem. This is the Newcastle United problem that's plagued them ever since Howe's came in, really. And that is, they don't really know how to play against a number 10. They don't really know how to play against someone who drops in between the lines. And Cole Palmer, I thought, really, really exploited that on Sunday.
When I spoke to Scott Trotter of Mirror Football earlier in the week and said, how do you stop Cole Palmer? And he said, well, you've got to try and mark him out of the game. Brighton had a little bit of success with that. And then you heard Alan Smith, obviously the legendary Arsenal striker. He was co-commentator, wasn't he, yesterday at Stamford Bridge. And twice or thrice, he actually said, why aren't they man marking him? I think the line that caught me was, Cole Palmer will be relishing not being man marked. I just couldn't in my head work out why you wouldn't do that. It was a bit like a deja vu moment, because was it last season when Newcastle sat deep, won 3-0 against Wolves, and it was like, wow, went down to Chelsea and everyone was saying, do the same thing. Chelsea hate it, didn't do it and got beat. And it was kind of one of those moments again where you go, like a lot of people who watch Chelsea are saying, just mark them out of the game. It's not going to be an easy task, but you'll do a hell of a lot better if you're trying to do that rather than just give him the free rein that he had. Because when you do that, he does exactly what he did against Newcastle United. Wonderful pass for the first goal, good finish for the second goal, and obviously had one ruled offside. I mean, why do you think he didn't set up to say to someone like Tonali or Bruno or Joelinton, get on him, rattle him. If he moves left, you go left. If he jumps, you jump. Don't let him go.
I really don't have the answer for it. And it's not as if Eddie Howe's against doing this. We've seen times, even this season, where he's tasked one midfielder with man marking and attack throughout the game. And, as I touched on there, Cole Palmer scores after 4 minutes. Again, because nobody knows who's picking him up. He turned Fabian Schär time and time again. And there was a little moment early in the game where Burn and Schär and Bruno and Joelinton were all sort of having a go at each other quite early on, because no one really knew what to do with Palmer. So I saw that and thought, well, okay, it's happened once. They've had a big let-off. Fia's got them off. It was offside. But then after that, there was no sort of fix to it. It just looked like, they didn't learn from the mistake. Now, look, it's easier said than done. We can sit here and say, why didn't they do this? Cole Palmer, by the way, is probably the Premier League's most informed player. He was absolutely fantastic yesterday. But Newcastle made it so easy for him. They could have made life so much harder. So yeah, as I touched on in the last answer, it just isn't an Eddie Howe performance. It is. We're not used to sitting here scratching the head as to why defensively they were so poor. I mean, Dan Burn, arguably player of the season so far, absolute stinker yesterday against Nicholas Jackson, unforgivable for the goal. So yeah, uncharacteristic from Howe, uncharacteristic from the defence. You can't give a player like Palmer that much time and space, not just once, but throughout the game.
You mentioned there, Dan Burn getting turned because he dropped into the midfield on one of the attacks, and Fabian Schär did a few moments later. Do you think that was the instruction? Because if it was the instruction, it's a bit of a bizarre one. And if it wasn't the instruction, then they've just gone rogue and done it anyway, which is equally not a good thing at all. What do you think the plan was with those two? Were they told one of you or both of you push up in the midfield, we'll go 3 at the back and we'll try and swamp it?
I think it looked. I don't think it was them going rogue. I think it was Dan Burn and Fabian Schär told to press Schär and Jackson. The problem you've got then is, Nicholas Jackson, one of the paciest forwards in the league, going up against Dan Burn, and even Fabian Schär doesn't have that pace anymore. You're leaving yourself so exposed. Why wasn't the message to Bruno or Tonali to just drop a couple of yards deeper and sit? Look, it's all hindsight now, but it just wasn't working from early doors. And as I said, Newcastle have really struggled with this type of team in the past. It's happened countless times against Arsenal when they play Odegaard in between the lines. It's happened at Brighton last season. I remember when Evan Ferguson, who was playing as a striker, dropped in deep and scored a hat-trick that day. And one of the main criticisms about Eddie Howe that you see on social media so much when Newcastle get beat is, he doesn't change it. He's one-dimensional. He doesn't know how to have sort of in-game management. And I think yesterday was sort of a little bit like that. There was none of this fix mid-game. It was just Newcastle really struggled early on and they struggled throughout. That second goal, the Palmer goal that stood, how much time and space does he have? Because the midfield are both getting sucked in. Isak loses the ball. And then Palmer, makes Schär and Pope punish. So...
Well, we've got to talk about the first goal first off, because the second goal is very interesting. We'll get onto that in a moment. Gary says, Aaron, you hit the nail on the head. Why leave Burn to mark a guy who is twice as fast? We've also got Lawrenson. Wake up, everybody. Take a long, hard look in the mirror without the rose-tinted glasses on. Howe is out of his depth, has been totally found out over 18 months. Dan Burn, player of the season. What the hell? Well, we'll talk about Dan Burn now. I don't agree with Lawrence on the comments about Eddie Howe, but he's entitled to his opinion. Let us know in the comments if you agree with him. Dan Burn, obviously last week it came out, various reports, that Newcastle United were stepping away potentially from the Mark Gay deal or signing another centre-back because Dan Burn had such a good start to the season. And he has done. There's no getting away from it. He's been absolutely brilliant. But I do wonder if hindsight, if that, getting that story out, has that been a mistake? And because you look at the way he played against Chelsea, and he was just, as you said, turned by Jackson. The goal that Jackson scored, he has a head start on Jackson.
Unforgivable. The defending for the first goal.
I text my mate because the initial reaction was, how has Jackson got that much space? And I said, well, I want to see a wider image of it. I don't want to jump in on Dan Burn straight away. Then they showed the wider image on the replay.
And it looks worse for Burn.
Every time you watch it, it gets worse because he's got so much. He's ahead of him in the play. And then you watch Jackson, he sprints, but he's not really busting too much of his gut to get out of Dan Burn.
Dan Burn, he wasn't looking at Jackson.
Because if you watch the replay, it's like he doesn't see him over his shoulder. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Gets past him, and then he kind of starts to move, and then he just realizes he can't catch up. And it's absolutely unforgivable, to be quite honest with him. And it kind of summed up the game he had. First of all, go on the point of the goal, and then we'll talk about the bigger picture with Dan Burn and whether Newcastle should write off getting another centre back. But the goal itself, first off,
the goal itself. As you've rightly said there, I think Burn thinks Fabian Schär is going to get to that ball before Neto, and he sort of slows down. But then as soon as Neto beats Schär, Dan Burn has already lost a couple of yards on Jackson, which he can't afford to give him. And then he sort of realises far too late that he's left his man. Pass of the season by Cole Palmer, by the way. What a pre-assist that was. It was absolutely fantastic. But Newcastle didn't make it easy for themselves at all. And Burn, as we said, really, really uncharacteristic from him, because that comment there might not agree that he's been a contender for player of the season, but I think a lot of fans will agree he's been he's been one of the standout performers this season. And back to your point, sorry, about the story coming out. I don't think the fact the story came out this week about the switch in transfer stance, I don't think that's really a problem. The problem, I think, is if the story is correct, because just because Dan Burns had a good start of the season, and yes, Sven Botman's coming back, centre back is still a position they need to improve on, and one of those reasons why was evident in the summer and definitely evident yesterday, and that there's not enough pace in that back line. Fabian Schär and Dan Burn are fantastic, but they just don't have the legs to deal with, pacey attackers like that yesterday.
I actually think the need for another centre back's been heightened slightly because of the way Fabian Schär's been performing of late. I think he's been so far off the level, and when you get to his age, the questions have to be asked whether it's a bad run of form or whether it's something more because of the age he's getting to. He's coming to the end of his career, and I just think it's all good kicking the can down the road and saying, well, we'll not buy one in January, we might even not buy one in the summer, but they need, I think, at least one centre back, and it's about being clever in the market and splitting your money and making sure that you can get both a centre back and that right winger. But on the goal, look, a wonderful pass from Cole Palmer, but Tino Livramento, he's too central. He's not out on the flank enough, and he's sucked in, and then he's totally misjudged the pass. Fabian Schär, he's never getting there. Like there was only ever two outcomes to what was going to happen. He was either going to wipe the player clean out and get himself sent off, or he was going to go, he was never going to get the ball, and it was the latter, and away goes Neto. You just knew he was never going to get there, and it was just very rash from him. But when you haven't got the pace, you are susceptible to those sort of things. But I do think Newcastle United, they need to look at the centre back, and it's not just about Botman coming back, because it's not going to be as easy as that. He's coming back from an injury that some players never recover from, and when you are a player whose pace is really important to your game, this isn't going to be a quick fix for Sven Botman. Even when he's past fit to play, I don't think we're going to see the best of him for quite a while. You look at how long it's taken Tyrone Mings to come back from the same injury. It's taken him a long time, and he's nowhere near ready to start games and get back to his best. So I think that's another reason why they need to look at the centre backs and go, what's the long-term aim here? And I think also it's time to be ruthless. I think Dan Burn's been brilliant. I think he's well worth the place in this squad. But I think people will be asking questions saying, look, if we're serious about the top six, is he a first choice centre back? For me, I don't think he is.
All valid points, and I think you can make the exact same points across the pitch. There's a real question to be asked and answered in January as to where do they prioritise? Do they go back in for a centre back straight away if that's the only thing they can afford? Or do they go for a right winger, or do they go for a central striker? Because let's be honest, all three positions need improving, and ideally you'd like to improve them all in January. Now, whether that's going to be possible financially, we don't know. January's notoriously a very, very tricky month to do business in anyway. But look, the same conversations we've been having about centre back, we can have about right wing. I mean, Jacob Murphy, just to move off the defence, sorry, slightly for a second, because I'm a bit tired of talking about it. Newcastle on the right wing position. They started Jacob Murphy at the start of the season off the back of a very good pre-season, and he's done absolutely nothing to nail that spot down. And I said the other week, I wouldn't be surprised to see Miggy come back in. But I mean, did Miggy touch the ball yesterday?
Generally,
19 touches. I mean, you're dropping a right winger who scored twice in 2024 for a right winger who hasn't scored in 2024. You're pretty much summing up, the crux of the problem. So issues to be ironed out with centre back. I agree. Botman coming back isn't going to fix it. He's going to get up to speed. He's not probably going to be back until around the festive period anyway. You need to find a long-term replacement for Schär. You need to go out and sign a right winger. Really, work to be done. But I mean, that's 2 months down the line. Howe's got to get a tune out of these players before then anyway.
Well, a lot of people in the comments are saying, what about Lloyd Kelly? Now, I'm still of the belief that Lloyd Kelly can be a very, very good Newcastle United player, but he didn't come on until very late against Chelsea. And I saw a lot of comments saying, well, if this is not the time, i.e. early in the game, to introduce him to that left-sided centre-back, I think in the end he came on for Lewis Hall, actually, didn't he? He ended up playing
Yeah,
left back.
Burn moved out to left back.
Yeah, Burnley. So, I mean, that gives you a bit of an insight as well to what might come down the line, to be quite honest, with Dan Burn, which is a little bit scary. But he has more pace than Dan Burn, which is Dan Burn's biggest frailty, is the lack of pace. Why not introduce him earlier into the game when you can see Dan Burns having an absolute shocker from 3 minutes in?
Yeah, I'm surprised it didn't come earlier. If I'm honest, I wouldn't have been surprised if Howard done what he's done in the last couple of weeks and maybe made a couple of half-time substitutions. I think the fact they got the goal before half-time maybe changed his mind on that. But yeah, look, I mean, what does it say about Lloyd Kelly? You know, surely you can't be using the excuse that he's not fit enough or he's not up to speed. He's had 2 or 3 months. Again, it just goes back to the window they had.
Do you think that, I mean, we can try and second guess Eddie Howe for Wednesday's game against Chelsea in the Cup, but I mean, could we see potentially a partnership of Emil Kraft and Lloyd Kelly and Eddie Howe saying, look, those two haven't done very good in the last few weeks. Now is a chance to state your claim. For what it's worth, I don't think that's going to happen. But we've got people in the comments saying, well, Fabian Schär was equally, is not worse than Dan Burn on Sunday. Is it not time for Emil Kraft to come back in?
I think probably at this stage of the competition in any other season, he might make those two changes. But I just think big game against Chelsea at home, they need to get through. He's been quite hesitant to make wholesale changes in the Cup this season and certainly last season. So I'm not sure. I mean, I don't think people would be against it. Generally, I think the standard of the performance from both of them yesterday, I don't really think you could grumble at either of them being dropped in midweek. I don't think I will do it. But look, I mean, Emil Kraft, his stock continues to rise. He's not even playing. You know what I mean? So I don't know, a big decision to be had. I mean, looking at the changes he could make for Wednesday, look at the changes he made yesterday. He made 5 subs, 3 of the players at the club before he joined, Eddie Howe, and 2 that he signed in the summer. The 2 that he signed in the summer got what? Stoppage time plus a couple of normal minutes. And the 3 that came off the bench, you know, what have they really offered this season? You know, there's a massive chance there for Sean Longstaff and Joe Willock to get their spot back in that team because of how that midfield 3 is playing and they're just not doing it. There's a huge chance for Jacob Murphy or Miguel Almiron to kick on down that right and they're not doing it. So, you know, how many changes does he actually make for Wednesday if the players that he's bringing in the pitch aren't performing when they're being given the opportunities off the bench anyway?
Yeah, I mean, we've got Ben here saying, you know, let's hope on Wednesday we see someone like Sanusi on the bench and maybe given a chance. But again, I think the fans would welcome that, but it's something I cannot see Eddie Howe doing. But I think we are at the stage where there's such an unhappiness at what they're watching. Like, people are not looking forward to tuning in to see Newcastle United. Why not give an exciting youngster a chance on Wednesday? Someone just to get them off their seats, you know, both at St James Park and at home. But for what it's worth, like I said, I don't think he will do that. Gary says, we got targeted on our left wing when Burn was left back. The pace or lack of it at the back is causing so many problems. Obviously, the club recognised this, unless Guy wouldn't have been so important. Leslie says, Hater coming back to the defence and replacing fullbacks isn't the answer, but the lack of experience, I feel, affects the wingers, the likes of Miggy. In summary, we need to build partnerships, which I do agree with. I think the constant changing of players on the flanks probably isn't helping things, but at the same time, you know, it's the ability of the players who are playing which is the undercurrent of problems at this moment in time. Look, Alexander Isak got an equaliser, a tap in for him. Tino Livramento pushing into the centre. Ball goes out to Joe Linton, then out to Lewis Hall, who puts a lovely cross into the box for Isak to tap home. Newcastle United against the run of play, really, but a nice team goal. And it kind of showed the attacking ability of both Livramento and Lewis Hall, which I don't think has ever been in doubt. It's going the other way, where people are a little bit wary of.
Yeah, really nice goal. And it just makes you wonder why they couldn't do it more often. But it was a really, really nice team goal. And as you say, Tino and Hall both instrumental in it. I actually probably think those two were probably the best 2 Newcastle United players yesterday. If I had to pick a couple, I think Lewis Hall looked very, very composed. for his age, and Tino was, had a very, very tricky task up against Neto, but did well. But yeah, really nice goal. Really, really important to score from open play, because that hanging over the heads, for over 600 minutes couldn't have been doing them any favours. Good to see Isak getting the goal, and I thought, okay, he's got his goal. Yes, he couldn't really miss, but that'll do wonders for his confidence. Surely, when he rounds the keeper in the second half and he's in the 6-yard box, he won't be able to miss. But just so happens that maybe it wasn't the confidence boosted we hoped for.
Yeah, let's talk about that then, because it was. I mean, we were watching it around my parents' house, and I don't often get that animated when I'm watching it on the TV, but I actually jumped up and was like, "Why didn't you just pass the ball?" And my little girl didn't know what was going on. I think I might have even scared her a little bit. I got wrong off my mum for that and my wife, but I just couldn't understand why why doesn't he shoot, or why doesn't he pass it to Longstaff or Joe Linton, who are in better positions than him to score the goal? And I think my biggest concern is, does it suggest that the players aren't all pulling in the same direction? Now, some people will say that's a massive leap to go from that one wasted chance to that. But I don't know if you saw the pre-match build-up, and they had an interview with Les Ferdinand. He was sitting down talking about his time on Tyneside and talking about the goals he scored. And they showed the highlights from Newcastle's win over Wimbledon when Vinnie Jones had to go and goal, and Les Ferdinand scored a hat-trick that day. And it shows his third goal. The ball comes in from the right, and Rob Lee heads it down to the feet of Sir Les, and Les puts it in the back of the net. And Les says, Rob really should have scored there, but he wanted me to get me hat-trick. And that's what that team was kind of built on, that unity, that kind of togetherness. And I just look at that and think, it wasn't there in that Isak chance. Now, on the other hand, people will say, we want our strikers to be ruthless. We want our strikers to be selfish. But I think there's a fine margin to being ruthless and just selfish to the detriment of the actual team.
I'll be completely honest. That was a massive leap, and I didn't expect you to just talk about Ferdinand and Lee for a minute there on the back of that question. But I don't really have an issue with him not passing, but why is he not shooting? Do you know what I mean? I know he's on his weak foot, and look, to give him the benefit of the doubt, and this is what Eddie Howe did in his post-match press conference. Eddie Howe said, look, when you slow it down and you screenshot it, as we all have, it looks 10 times worse. He's going at 100 miles an hour. His mind's all over the place. He just got caught in between shooting and passing. Fair enough. But again, it goes back to that thing of, if that was the Alexander Isak of last season, I think that would be in the back of the net. And there was a moment in the first half which has probably been forgotten about because it didn't really have an impact on the game. But the ball got floated over the top of Chelsea's defence, and Isak was in the box. And there was just a split second where he could have taken the shot before Fofana closed him down, and he didn't. And I think last season, Isak hits that first time, and he ended up squaring it to Barnes, and Barnes' shot got blocked, and Tonali's shot got blocked. There's just something not clicking with him. I think it's one goal in 7 or 8 games this season, and I think it's 18 shots per every goal he's scored. It's just not clicking for him. It's not working. And I don't think it's a lack of service, because he had chances to win, not win the game, but he had chances to draw Newcastle level yesterday, and he didn't take them.
Do you think last season's success in front of goal, talk of a new contract, has maybe gotten into his head slightly? I mean, Eddie Howe, last week when he was asked about Isak's contract situation, and then the ambition of the so-called bigger players, said it was kind of a two-way street. They need to be performing on the pitch as well. And obviously, we're not seeing that with Isak. Or do you think it's just something else? He's just maybe struggling to overcome that injury that he had for the last month or so.
I don't think the contract thing is really that big of an issue. I think if his deal was running out in 2025, then we could have all these worries about it. But the fact he's got so long on his contract, I'm not really too phased about that. And I don't think he will be either. And Eddie Howe certainly isn't. Look, I just think that the team itself is not clicking. I mean, we touched on it last week on the pod, didn't we, when that clip was getting shared on social media of Newcastle, playing that free flow and attacking football against Palace. And, where's that been this season? And apart from really the goal they scored yesterday, the team goal, there was none of that really. And I think that's affecting Isak. But then again, you look at Brighton last Saturday and he had 7 chances and Newcastle played well. And I don't know, he doesn't look like the Isak of old. And yes, maybe he's still carrying something, or maybe it's the team situation. I don't know. But hopefully yesterday's goal will be the sort of catalyst for more. You suspect he'll start against Chelsea in midweek because they've got very limited options to do otherwise. So you've just got to hope that he's found that spark, even though, he missed 2 chances in the second half.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's just not clicking throughout the whole of the team. But that kind of goes back to the point I made about the unity, because that's what Newcastle United were built on, and you could bet your last penny that they'd all be working for each other. But I don't know. It just looking at it, is it there? I mean, one thing that stood out as well was the total lack of reaction to the mistakes we made in the game. I mean, I'm sorry if I'm Nick Pope. When Jackson scores that goal, he picks the ball up and he throws it into the crowd. But then there's nothing else. If I'm Nick Pope, and maybe this is just the character that I am, and I know Nick Pope's not one to go around and maybe really make his voice heard, but do you not want your goalkeeper, I'm not saying, shaking your teammates, but getting in their faces and saying, how on earth have you let him beat you after you had nearly a 10-yard head start on him? You're not going into Fabian Schär's face and saying, why did you back off Cole Palmer? Why did you let him run all that distance only to shoot into the corner where admittedly I should have saved it, but still, you shouldn't have backed off him. And then you've got the Isak chance. Joe Linton has got his head in the ground, but there's no reaction. And I want to see players, being a bit more reactive to the situation. And maybe look on the team bus, Joe Linton's got him up against the wall and said, next time that ball comes to me or else. We've heard stories of Shearer and Ginola. Who knows? We don't know what goes on behind closed doors. But certainly on the pitch, we're not seeing those reactions that you saw last season when Sean Longstaff would often be the one shouting at players for not being in the right position. Trippier would often also be hearing his voice, and Bruno as well. We're not seeing that, and I think that is really becoming an issue, because if they're not feeling the need to react on the pitch, then it's going to be hard to find the solution to all the problems that Newcastle have got at the moment.
Yeah, my sort of overwhelming take from yesterday was that it just looks a bit stale, everything, just from the type of football they're playing. It's become very predictable. Eddie Howe's substitutions are becoming very predictable. The full team just seems to be in a little bit of a rut at the minute, and I think it's hard to see how they get out of that. I think they need a big result somewhere. They should have got it at Brighton. They didn't. I think that's only added to the issue. Look, I don't know what it is, but we're definitely not seeing the Newcastle of old, where, as you say, they were fighting for each other and, really up for games and, flying into tackles and sort of becoming, unbeatable with that sort of team spirit. We're not seeing that anymore. Does it go back to the fact that, I've seen quite a few people mentioning it on social media? Is it the fact that they've changed captaincy and Bruno's not the leader that, maybe Eddie Howe thought he was? I don't know. I think there's a number of reasons why it's not working. But they need to turn it around fast, because, as we said, the fixtures get no easier. And, as I said, I think that tide is starting to turn.
Bush madness, as players don't look like they are playing as a team. That's half the problem this season. It was fluid before, and now it's like there is a lack of chemistry, which I'm sure a lot of people will agree with. I think the other thing that is quite frustrating, we mentioned there the second goal and the fact that Fabian Schär just backed off, but obviously Isak's given the ball away. And then strangely, every one of the midfield stepped forward as Isak had the ball, which then allowed Chelsea the space behind to run into, and Palmer's just gone, and Schär's got to step into him and just stop him. He's pushed him wide, but he's still given him enough space to have a shot off. Pope should save it. It's poor from the keeper, but I'm looking at things ahead of him. I don't think Schär's done enough to stop that. Well, obviously he's not done enough to stop that effort on goal. But there were other elements in the game as well, other times in the game where Chelsea were attacking Newcastle. And there was one moment when, I'm trying to think who it was a Casido maybe, but there was an effort on goal. And what you had was they were coming down Newcastle's right, and Dan Burn, instead of tracking the man, followed the ball, which then allowed his man to run into the box. And I think it was a save from Nick Pope in the end. And we're seeing this week in, week out. And it's just concerning. I don't know about you, but one of the first things I was taught as a aspiring footballer was not to follow the ball. You follow your man. And it just seems every time Newcastle have a bad defensive display, it comes down to the lack of the basics, and that is, don't just follow the ball, because you're just allowing whoever's around you a free rein into the box.
Yeah, absolutely. There was times where it definitely happened yesterday, and again, it just goes back to the point we made at the very start of, there just didn't seem to be a cohesive plan for what to do out of possession. And he thought, given how studious Eddie Howe is and how much he'll have, analysed Chelsea this season, you would have thought they would have had a handle on it. That share moment, I mean, look, maybe I'm being a bit harsh, because I think he shows Palmer on the wrong side. He's trying to take Palmer outside, but he's keeping him on a strong foot. Should he have maybe taken him inside? I don't know. Other people will say, well, he tried to narrow that angle so that he could only beat Pope at the neck post. He obviously does beat Nick Pope at the near post. I think that the fault is probably more on Pope than Cher, but Cher certainly backs off him too much. So yeah, I think there was blame across a number of areas yesterday.
Got Ben saying it's not all doom and gloom though. We've lost 2 games this calendar year at home. I genuinely believe we can win on Wednesday. That sets us up for Saturday. If we did beat Arsenal again, we would be 3 behind them. I have faith in how he's been handed a terrible hand by the club, but if backed, he will turn it around. Truel saying, I'm not saying Isak did the right thing, but if we scored, Chelsea would have gone for the 3rd, and we would have got it, to be fair. We were rotten in defence. Yeah, I mean, is it all doom and gloom? Again, we look at expected goals, 2.11 to Chelsea's 1.66. Newcastle had 49% possession to Chelsea 51, 437 passes to 458. So, total shots, 11 total shots to Chelsea 17. Big chances, they created 3 big chances to Chelsea's 1. The stats suggest the game was a lot closer than maybe in my head I'm concluding it was. And Eddie Howe seems very impressed with what he saw as well. I can play the clip, and I will do in a second. But before that, is it all doom and gloom? Are we overreacting to what was, in the end, potentially a very close game, and Newcastle have lost out to what some say are a very good club?
Well, it isn't all doom and gloom, and I appreciate that. That might sound a bit ironic, given that we just spent 37 minutes talking about how it is doom and gloom. But the lad in the comments there makes a good point. And Eddie Howe, as you said, keeps trying to take these positives. Now, that will only get him so far, but, the way he's looking at it is they picked up some very good results while playing pretty poorly at the start of the season. The performances had massively improved. Manchester City was good. They played well at Everton, just couldn't score. They played well at Brighton and shouldn't have got beaten. He was asked about Dan Burn and Fabian Schär yesterday, and he said, look, I'll defend them because they've played so well this season. Did they just come up against a very good team yesterday and fall short against one of the best players in the league? Maybe. The proof is going to be, in the next couple of games, because there's only so long we can keep saying stuff like this. There's only so long we could keep saying, well, they weren't playing well, but they were getting results. There's only so long you can say, well, they're playing well, but they're not getting results. If we're sat here in 2 or 3 games' time, they're out of the cup and we're heading into an international break and they're 8 without a win, it's a very, very different conversation we're having.
Well, that West Ham game becomes massive. I mean, look, people will say, well, Andrew, last week you were flying high. They were going to hammer Chelsea and all this. What I saw against Brighton, as I mentioned in the show, was I thought they were quite dominant. I thought the midfield was as good as it's been all season. Against Everton. Again, they created chances. They were strong at the back. But the contrast to the performance we saw on Sunday, it was just, it was just really, it was not the Newcastle I'd seen in the previous 2 games, which is why I'm a little bit more concerned than maybe some others are. I just think to go from the level you put in against Brighton, even though you lost it, to the level we saw against Chelsea, and I don't agree with some of Eddie Howe's quotes. He said it was a game between 2 really good Premier League sides. I don't agree with that. I think Chelsea, as I said earlier, aren't a top 4 side, and Newcastle United, if they want to be in Europe, they have to be beating the likes of Chelsea, and they haven't done. And you're right. We can't be going into November saying it'll come. They're doing really well. They've improved because time is running out. And I think the biggest concern is if you can't beat Chelsea and you can't beat Brighton, the teams around you battling for Europe, and you can't beat Everton, and you can't beat other teams down there at the bottom fighting for their lives, and who are you beating?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the one sort of shining light that I'm sort of clinging on to is that Eddie Howe, has got very, very good at Newcastle United at never really getting himself or allowing himself to become under too much pressure. And what I mean by that is the blips that he has are never really too long and too sustained. I mean, the fact that Erik ten Hag has been sacked this morning means that Eddie Howe, I think, is now the fourth or fifth longest serving manager in the Premier League, which is pretty remarkable given that he's been here since 2021. And I was looking back at the stats from Eddie Howe's previous seasons at Newcastle. Now he's gone 5 without a win in the league so far this season. They did the exact same in 2021-22 when they lost to Leicester, Liverpool and City, drew with Man United, and then lost to Cambridge and drew with Watford. That was famously before they beat Leeds and ended up staying up. The season after, at the very start of the season, they drew against Brighton, City, Wolves, then lost to Liverpool and drew with Palace and Bournemouth. Later in the season, around the time they beat Southampton in the League Cup, they drew with Palace, West Ham, Bournemouth, lost to City, lost to Liverpool, lost the Carabao Cup final. And then last season, there was only ever really a similar run to this one around Christmas when they lost to Everton, Spurs, Milan, then they beat Fulham, and then over Christmas, they lost to Chelsea in the Carabao Cup, Luton, Forest, Liverpool. So when we're sort of approaching the time where Eddie Howe usually turns it round, so am I just sort of clinging to the hope that he's done it before?
No, I've seen certain people say that, that this is kind of Eddie Howe has these kind of runs where he will go on 5-6 runs without games without a win, and then he'll turn it around and we'll all be singing his praises. And I still think that's going to happen. I still think he will turn it around, but it has to happen rather quickly, especially depending on what happens on Wednesday, because they cannot afford to go out of the cup. Before I play the clip of Eddie Howe, you mentioned Erik ten Hag there. Does his sacking potentially put a little bit more pressure on the situation here at St James's Park, given that the two teams are so close together, both with the same aspirations, of getting into Europe, both underperforming, I think everyone would say. They've sacked their manager. Do you think it does maybe get people thinking in the boardroom a little bit, or are you thinking now they don't care what they don't care about the noise outside of the boardroom? They're very tunnel vision. They will make their own decision when the time is right.
I think it's worth pointing out that our chief writer at the Chronicle this morning, Lee Ryder, did a story basically saying PIF are not at that stage with Eddie Howe yet, and they're ready to give him time and back him before making any sort of hasty decisions. To make a decision like this now, when you've got Darren Eales, the CEO, potentially departing in a couple of weeks as well, would be big scale changes to make in such a short period of time. So it looks like Eddie Howe will get a period of grace, which I think he should. He's got enough credit in the bank. The run isn't that bad. As Lee states in that piece, the board are actually quite pleased with the performances. As we've said, they've played quite well in recent weeks without maybe getting the results that they've earned. I think what it does, and what I was sort of looking at this morning when Ten Hag got sacked, is the big thing about the debate we keep talking about on social media. Is it time for Howe to go or not? One of the big arguments has been, well, who comes in? I think looking at that list of who is in the running to replace Ten Hag is really revealing as to probably who would be in the running for the Newcastle job. So at the minute for Manchester United, you've got behind Van Nistelrooy, I should say, you've got Ruben Amorim from Sporting Lisbon, who potentially could go to Man City when Pep leaves. He's just won the league title in Portugal. He would be a shrewd appointment for anyone. You've got Gareth Southgate, which I don't think anyone will be touching with a barge pole. You've got Xavi, who's at Barcelona, and apparently doesn't want to take a club until the summer. Then you start looking at the likes of Graham Potter, Thomas Frank, and one which Ole Gunnar Solskjaer back in there, the same price as Eddie Howe, if anyone wants to flutter on him. And then there's a really interesting one in Edin Terzic, who got Dortmund to the Champions League final last year. He's been linked with West Ham. He would be a really, really interesting appointment. And I think if Howe was to go, I think I would have liked to see him at Newcastle. But that just gives you a sort of general idea of who would be in the running. So if anyone does want Howe out and thinks that you get someone better in that list, then there you go. But I think it's right that Eddie Howe gets time to turn this around. And I think he will. He's done it before. I think he'll do it again.
Yeah, I think he will get time. I think it is right he gets time. And I think he will turn it around. I think the board understand that the window wasn't at all helpful to Eddie Howe. And people can say, we can't keep saying that the window is the reason, but it's a massive part of the reason Newcastle United are performing so badly, because as we've said for the previous 3 weeks, it's not just about improving the team ability wise, it's about what that does to the spirit within the camp, to the spirit in the fan base. When Anthony Gordon was unveiled on the pitch at St James's Park with good old Harrison Ashby in the lift, you got off that. Like, that's what it's about. It's more than just the player. It's so many other things, and to not have a big name come in the last couple of windows is a really big failure from Newcastle United. I think they accept that. And it's going to be interesting what happens in January, and then of course the summer. So I think that's another reason why Eddie Howe will get more time, because of the summer window. That said, does he need to be open to change in terms of the formation, in terms of the personnel? I would. I mean, he's going to stick with the formation, I think. And I think he's largely going to stick with the personnel. So I've just answered my own question. And I think because of the way they performed against Brighton, against Everton, and clearly he thinks they performed well against Chelsea, then that's the reason why. But from your point of view, Aaron, is that the way he freshens it up to get rid of that kind of staleness which is running through the team at the moment?
I mean, how can he really freshen it up if we're being completely honest? Does he have to bring Emil Kraft in to change it up at the back? He'll say, well, we've actually been performing quite well defensively. That midfield three, I hate to say it, because I watched them at Manchester City draw 1-1, and I thought it's clicking, it's working, but I just don't think the three of Joe, Bruno, and Tonali is working. And then what does he do up front if Gordon's injury is potentially serious, which we don't know if it is yet? He's having a scan today. He is stuck with with Almiron or Murphy out on the right. So I don't think there's too much he can do to tinker with it. I've seen one thing mentioned. It's something that we spoke about last week, and that's potentially playing Joe Willock in midfield and Joe Litton on the left, or vice versa. But I think back to your point on the summer, I think both things can be true. Eddie Howe was massively let down in the summer by not having his squad strengthened. He's dealing with a weaker hand this time around than he was last year. But also he's got to get the best out of this team, and he's not doing that at the minute. So, but he does need to change something, because it is looking a little bit stale.
Paul says change the shape, give different instructions to the players. We do have clearly doesn't have the tactical. Well, he says he doesn't believe he's got the tactical nous to do. Jackson, we're missing Elliot Anderson. Dino says put Big Joe sitting deep. That gets his vote, which is something I can subscribe to. Omar says Tonali, Bruno, and Joe Linton doesn't work, and I think taking Tonali off yesterday was the right decision. And the argument is that Sean Longstaff potentially offers a little bit more balance. I'm really intrigued to see Lewis Miley, to be quite honest with you. I think we could see him coming in the side in the next few weeks when he builds a bit more fitness up. I think we'll see him on Wednesday, actually, as well. I think he's got a good chance, because the midfield three of Tonali, Bruno, and Julian isn't working as good as they are individually. It's just not working. Sean Longstaff offers a bit more balance, but again, he comes off the bench, and there was a moment where he gets the ball, 10, 15 yards outside Chelsea's box, and he drives forward, and then he just passes it straight to a fullback. And it's just like, you're not helping yourself in this instance, because you have a really good chance here to stake a claim in the team, and those mistakes are being made. Graham says, which top end manager would touch us right now without huge guarantees and squad strengthening? And Omar says the facts are Tonali wasn't the right signing. Barnes wasn't the right signing. We need to sort out our ideas as soon as possible. Something just isn't right, in his opinion. I thought there were little things that weren't working on Sunday as well, which stood out to me. Hall coming down the left, and he had a 1-2 with Joe Linton, who then put it back onto his right foot. And it's like, that's not going to be helpful. Then you had Barnes running down the left into the middle, and Chelsea know exactly what he's going to do. He wants to get into that right and hit it from the centre. And they did that really well. But if you look over to the actual right of the pitch, Chelsea's left-hand side, the space there is unbelievable. You get a bust through it. No Livramento bombing down. I'm not sure who the right winger was at this time, but there was just no one overlapping. And you're thinking, someone get down there, Barnes can pick the pass, you put it in the back, you put it in the box, job done. And it's little things like that which you left scratching your head, just thinking, It was there. It was there last season in part. It was there the season prior to that, and that's what's missing. Those little things, which get you a win. And what we'll do now is we will hear from Eddie Howe and his thoughts on the performance. So this is what he had to say.
Yeah, I'd say the majority I liked. I thought it was a strong performance. I think coming here, it's going to be a very difficult game, especially when you concede relatively early in the match. Big moment for us in terms of our response. I thought our response was really strong. Scored a great goal ourselves, and we weren't perfect in our performance. We've lost the game, but I thought it was another improvement. And I feel the team's moving in the right direction, albeit we're making a couple of mistakes that's cost us today.
What did you make of that then, Aaron? The team's improving, they're moving in the right direction. We're just making a couple of mistakes which have cost us the game.
Well, they're not moving in the right direction in the Premier League table. So, look, I don't know. I think, as we've touched on, it's been a season of sort of two halves. We had poor performances but results at the start, and now it's sort of gone the other way. Chelsea was a little bit of an anomaly because they didn't play well, I thought. I think now, the proof is going to be in the pudding. They've got two big home games. Bruno came out yesterday and spoke about how, these next two games are really crucial, but they've got confidence because they're playing with, sort of an extra man in terms of the crowd. But I tell you what, that crowd atmosphere needs to be better than it was against Wimbledon in the Cup. And I'm sure it will be. And we know that games against Arsenal are typically feisty at St James's Park. So are they moving in the right direction? I don't know, but 2 wins this week, and I think they certainly will be.
I think they are moving in the right direction, but the final destination you only reach by winning games. And it goes back to what we were saying earlier. I'm sure Howe is aware of this. You can't keep saying it over and over again. We're improving. We're improving. They have improved. The performances have been much better, but you need to start turning those performances into wins. We've got Scott saying, what on earth is the evidence that Howe can turn this around? We've regressed steeply and haven't put in a good performance for a calendar year. Don't agree with that. I thought the City performance was good, and there have been other performances to talk about as well. You, Aaron, you mentioned Bruno's interview after the game. I actually thought it's probably his best performance of the season, to be quite honest with you. I don't think he's been himself at all this season. Great to see him with so much passion. Great to see him being honest, but I'd like to see that on the pitch and get back to the heights we know he can. I did ask for people to get in touch before we started recording, Aaron, and to let me know what they think is the biggest issue at the moment at Newcastle United. So I've had quite a few responses. Thank you to everyone.
A few responses. My notifications have been absolutely blown up. How long have we actually got? Because the amount of people that have got in touch, and I think we've probably got 50 or 60 different answers as to what's going wrong. So if you just want to reel them off, I'll just go make a cuppa.
Yeah, you go on. Interestingly, there's very few, I think maybe 1 or 2 who've pinpointed Eddie Howe as the issue, which shows you, I think, just how much support he has got amongst the fan base. So Kim says, leadership on the field. Nobody's replaced Trippier's leadership and organisation capabilities, which is something that we've spoken about previously in recent weeks. Alistair says, why persevere with Byrne being good this season? Admittedly, Longstaff offers nothing yet because he's a local lad. We play him. Why did we not make an effort to sign a right winger that we've needed for 3 years? Eric says, I'm not worried because we're creating chances, turn to worry. Points on the board is what ultimately matters. We've got Graham saying, fans calling for Eddie Howe to go. The single biggest problem. We are strongest when we've all put together. You win nothing when you are divided. Ursa says big players not hitting the form of the last 2 seasons. Chris says defence is too slow, midfield too static, attackers unbalanced and too predictable. We've got A. Wild saying right wing and defensive centre midfielder. We have got Irish Bob here saying I think Eddie Howe is taking them as far as he can. We've got John, interestingly here, saying expectations. Squad is weaker than we think and hasn't been improved on in 2 windows. We had all our star players when we got 4th. We've been without bottom pretty much ever since. No Wilson, Willock not fit. Only one of our solid back 4 remains. And our right wing. John says, I speak for every fan. The summer transfer window. We've got Leo saying too much change behind the scenes has filtered down the pitch. Tosh saying defensive midfielder. David saying no right winger. Tommy saying the centre backs lack mobility. Callum saying too many bottom half Premier League / Championship players still playing for this club. Jake saying team consistency between injury and tactical changes. We haven't had the same front three week in, week out, which is again something that's been mentioned in this episode. Sid saying biggest issue playing two slow centre halves. Rob saying the rigid 4-3-3 formation with inverted wingers was so predictable. And Boo Boy saying, is your episode going to be 6 hours long? We've gone back in the last 3 transfer windows buying Jack all of trades, midfielder, and 2 fullbacks who can't defend. They've been left behind a lot of clubs, including one with Sells, Woods and Anderson. And he's not a fan of Howe's tactics either. Tic-tacs tactics. So quite a few there. I mean, any stand out to you?
It's hard, isn't it, to drill down on a single issue for where it's going wrong. I think it's just a continuation of such a disappointing summer, and I think it's just the rot has sort of sunk in now. Failure to back Eddie Howe, I think, and people will turn around and say, well, he was back, they try to get Gay. I mean, actually physically getting players through the door for him. I think that's the single biggest thing why Newcastle are struggling.
Yeah, the window is probably the cornerstone of the issues. The injuries haven't. I mean, Callum Wilson's absence is massive, isn't it? That's huge, because you would probably take Isak off on the hour mark maybe, and look to bring in a striker of his quality you just haven't got. I agree. I think they're a little bit too predictable with the substitutes, but then people would say, well, what options has Eddie Howe actually got? There's another defensive house. So, there's a lot of issues. It's not just one man. It's not just Eddie Howe's fault. He has been let down with summer window, but I am backing him to turn this around. I think he will do. And fingers crossed it starts with 2 victories this week. What I will say, though, on the transfer window, Darren, and I got a bit of stick for the suggestion that Liam Delap should be the man who comes in, but he scores again. And I stick by my point. If you're going to spend £20 million or you're going to spend £15 million on a man that you're only ever going to give 2 minutes each game, why not just find an extra 5-10 million to go and sign him a player who's better than him and who looks right at home in the Premier League? I mean, Delap would have been a brilliant signing this summer for Newcastle.
Hang on, you've never mentioned Liam Delap before, have you? You weren't calling for him to come in the summer. You've never said.
I started up the Newcastle United fan club for him. I was the only member.
New one, yeah.
Don't worry, I've screenshotted everyone who had a go at us. So when he wins the golden boot, I'll be back. But Mbeumo, score sheet again. We know where these players are. We know Newcastle United should be targeting. Apparently, Mbeumo is one of them that they really like in terms of January. I mean, we're going over our ground, but he'd be such a good signing, wouldn't he, Mbeumo?
Yeah, he would. He really would. He's been fantastic this season. I'm really, really surprised he stayed at Brentford and there wasn't any takers, especially when he came out and said he wanted to go. So wouldn't that be a raise for the spirits if they could get someone like him in the first day of January?
We've got a question here saying, do we think we should stop being so worried about PSR and actually go hard for some big players, knowing that we have the ability to sell a big asset like Bruno Isak if necessary?
I've seen a few people, and I've had a few people say to me this season, in the last couple of days, and it's coincidentally on the back of Elliot Anderson playing so well. But I've seen a lot of people saying, I would have just taken the points deduction. I would have just taken it and kept him. I've seen a lot of people sort of change into that viewpoint. But I don't think that's ever really the answer, is it? So it's happened now. They got themselves in a mess, which they should have never got themselves in. Hopefully they've learned the lessons. But yeah, what, points deduction right now? Where would there be relegation zone? I don't know. So
well, I think the point being made there is that go and spend a little bit more money than you would like, but be prepared for a big sale with the likes of Isak or Bruno. I think Newcastle just got to be clever when it comes to cashing in on players when they're at their peak and then reinvest in that. And that's something that, of course, I think Mitchell has talked about previously. But look, as we've said, Eddie Howe, I don't think he's under immense pressure in the short to medium term. I think this is a very, very important week for him. I think getting through the cup is more important than anything. I would have taken a defeat on Sunday if it meant victory on Wednesday to get through the next round. I don't know about you. Would you take that?
Yes, I definitely would.
So I think it's a big week, and we won't speak on the podcast again, Aaron, until Monday. But if he has lost the next 2 games, what are you thinking? Are we thinking that maybe the pressure increases slightly?
Slightly, I think that's probably underselling it. I think if they do lose the next 2, then please don't tweet and include me asking people to put in what's going wrong, because I don't think my phone can handle those notifications. Look, if they lose the next two, the pressure builds massively. But I think you still need to give him time. But I think that West Ham game becomes huge, doesn't it? Before the international break. So look, he's got to win one of the two. I think he's got to win the cup game out of the two of them if he can only take one. But look, they're back at St James's Park. The crowd will really be up for it on Wednesday, I hope. I wouldn't be surprised if they get results from both of them. Maybe that's just
me too. I think they will get through against Chelsea on Wednesday, and they'll give Arsenal a good game. I don't know if you can hear the noise in the background. My daughter suddenly found the little drum set and is playing away there in the background. We've got Nigel saying, "I back Eddie 100%. Look at what he's done with the Championship players. Imagine what he could do with, say, Chelsea's 2.2 billion." And that's the point, isn't it? Eddie Howe has earned the right to have longer than some might necessarily give him, and he's got my back and he's got Aaron's back, and fingers crossed he can turn it around. Davey says, "Thanks, lads. I really believe we will get there in the end. I'm sure of it." Right, 20 questions. Are you ready? You got your pen? You got your paper?
I've got my phone, so that'll have to do.
Right. So Aaron has 20 questions to guess the player that I've got in front of me. He's not had a very good success rate of late. We've had people getting them within 2 or 3 questions, which is actually keeping me up at night. We had Rob Smythe, who was my old boss down in the Burton Mail, actually. He got last week's call caught within 3. And I'm like, what are these people doing? I tell you what, it's a good job I got me NORD VPN, isn't it? Because it's protecting us. Or is it? No, it is. Right, come on then. 20 questions. Let's do this.
Is he British?
He is.
Is he an attacker?
No, he's not.
Did he play more than 100 times?
He played 76 times for Newcastle United. Or, well, actually, 104 times in all competitions. So, yes, he did play more than 100 times.
Did he play pre-2010?
He did. I'm looking at his picture here on Wikipedia, and you know when someone's just like literally shoved the camera in the face.
I feel like all Wikipedia photos, I like that actually. I feel like they just get them at the worst angles. Right, pre-2010, 76. He's not an attacker. He's British. Did he play under Sir Bobby?
He did.
You love a Sir Bobby pick at the minute, haven't you? Acuna, Brad.
It's the best era, isn't
it? Is he a midfielder?
He's not.
Okay, so he's a defender. Yes.
Oh, he looks so smart. Come on, then you can have a guess.
Steve Watson.
No, someone in the comments has said that, and this is the thing. I don't know if I can control your view to the comments, but it's not Steve Watson.
Okay.
No.
British defender under Sir Bobby. Then it's got to be Warren Barton.
It's not Warren Barton.
Couldn't be Warren Barton. Warren Barton would be too easy, wouldn't it?
It's not Aaron Hughes because he's Northern
Well,
Irish.
I tell you what, I'm gonna have a guess here, and if it is, this is actually the person that I was gonna say to you if you asked me to be the host, and it was gonna be Titus Bramble.
It's not Titus Bramble. We've had a few people there with Barton and Bramble in the comments. Robbie Elliott's another one, not him.
I'm going to also dive back in the comments and say Andy Griffin. Was Griffin English?
Yes, it is Andy Griffin, but this is why this can't work remotely, because you can see the comments and you're just getting it too easy.
Well, that was actually going to be my next guess anyway. So
okay, so that I'm going to say that's 7, but I'm going to put a penalty of 3 on because you cheated.
Put an asterisk on it, yeah.
Thank you to everyone who has tuned in today. More than 1,000 views currently, which is unbelievable. We really do appreciate the support. And if you're after the very best protection for your devices, do head over to nordvpn.com/tune for a very special discount offer, courtesy of this podcast. Thank you very much, guys, for tuning in, for listening. Leave us a rating review. Hit thumbs up on the YouTube if you're watching. Share it across your social media. Get in touch as well via the EIBW podcast at reachplc.com. It's a busy week ahead. We'll have plenty of podcasts coming with the Chelsea game and then Arsenal as well. And for myself and Aaron, we'll see you guys next week.